I really wanted to comment on this clip where Joe from Unsolicited Advice talks with Alex O'Connor about how to ground logic. It's a fascinating topic where he outlines the philosophical problems that theism has with grounding logic in God. Take a look.
Theists can make a pretty cool move, which is say, well, because God has ordered the world according to the laws of logic. If God is going to be explanatory there, it sort of implies that God could have given the world a different logic. And I think that's really cool. But that in turn raises tensions for classic theistic responses to things like, can God make a stone so heavy he can't lift it? Because the classic theistic response, which I think is perfect and brilliant, that's why I don't really think it's, can God make a stone so heavy he can't lift it? It's a problem. It's just to say, well, a stone so heavy God can't lift it doesn't make any sense. It's a self-contradictory property. But of course, if God crafts the laws of logic and God grounds the laws of logic, then in order for that to be explanatory, it kind of seems like God could have made it differently. Because otherwise it's like, well, if God couldn't have made it differently, then in what sense is he grounding it in a way that, I don't know, Platonism wouldn't? Or it just then becomes a bare fact about immaterial reality rather than material reality. So there's a potential tension there with other potential like theistic responses.
So either logic comes from God, in which case it could have been different, or it doesn't come from God, which means that God is not first, but logic precedes even God himself. Both of these are quite problematic for theism. In the first case, if God could create any kind of logic that he wanted, there is a possibility that he could create a stone so heavy that he can't lift it. However, there is a philosophical problem with this. First of all, the assumption is that if God can create a rock so heavy he can't lift it, that is contradictory to his omnipotence. That is only true using our logic. If God created a new logic, then how do you know that statement still applies? It wouldn't make sense. On the other hand, if logic precedes God, if it comes before God, then God is not first, God is not the ultimate authority, and that contradicts with who God is. God is first and grounds everything. So if God doesn't ground logic, then there is a self-contradiction going on. How can we solve that? Well, this seems very similar to the UFO dilemma. Does God create goodness, or does he conform to goodness that precedes him? It's the same kind of problem. And the solution is actually also exactly the same. Neither goodness nor logic precedes God, and they are not created by God in such a sense that there was God and then hereafter came logic and goodness. Logic and goodness were inherent in God, or are inherent in God. They come from God, from his very nature. Theists don't believe that God is creating goodness or logic in some mysterious way. It's just who he is. Another way to think about it is everything that is created in the image of God to some degree. Everything. Atoms, people, angels, logic, morality, everything is in some way an image of God. This means that God is the whole, and from that whole, some aspects are abstracted away, and that's where everything comes from. It's not just made up arbitrarily. It's something that comes from God himself. And that's why there is no contradiction. Later on in the video, Joe suggests that atheists could possibly have a way out from this by grounding logic in some kind of a Platonic realm of maybe abstract ideas or something like this. However, that is actually a problem because that cannot happen. Why? Logic by itself is incomplete. It's not perfect. God is perfect. God is everything. Like I said, everything comes from him. All of logic, all of reason, all of morality, all things, all matter, all people, everything. So God can be an end in and of itself, but logic is incomplete, and anything that is incomplete, you couldn't really define it as incomplete or lacking something if that something didn't exist prior to it. It would be impossible. You can't say, for example, that I don't live in America if there was no such place as America. That sentence then wouldn't make any sense. America would first have to exist in order for me to say that I don't exist in it. Otherwise, I'm just talking gibberish. So logic can be said to lack something. Logic by itself is just an abstraction, it has no causal power. Therefore, it has to be grounded in something higher. And that something, or someone, is God. Thanks for watching. If you want to see more content like this, please like, share and subscribe.